Hello, Paper and Glam readers. Welcome to Book Club Thursday. Thank you guys so much for carving out this time out of your schedules to sit down and talk books with us. For me, as a reader, I feel like nothing has really equipped me for life more than reading, and it just means a lot to me. And I know the rest of the book chatters in the Paper and Glam community that we, come together once a month and read a book and hopefully learn a little something about life or how to live better or just about things that have shaped our culture. And one of those books that has definitely shaped our culture is Breakfast at Tiffany's. And tonight we are discussing this book that is kind of like, for me, it's the dawn of American glamour and just a movie more than a book. This is my first time reading the book, but just something that's really shaped me in the way that I just design as someone who designs products, and there's just so much here to unpack from a cultural perspective. So I'm so excited to discuss this with you tonight, and I have a feeling we're going to get some new watchers who may have joined us from just the thumbnail, because Breakfast at Tiffany's is something that's impacted so many of us. So I wanted to kind of give those of you who might be new a little intro into who we are. We are about 2,000 women reading around the world, one book a month, totally manageable. Everybody can do it. So if that resonates with you, we'd love to have you join us, and all the information is in the description bar. So with that intro, we're going to go ahead and do our icebreaker for the evening. And our icebreaker is, oh my gosh, I didn't put it in my little notes, and I can't remember. Oh, now I remember. Sorry, guys. So the icebreaker is from Katrina. Thank you, Katrina, for this. It is, what makes you feel like Holly does at Breakfast at Tiffany's? It can be a place, it can be experience, it can be a season, it can be something that is maybe a memory. And I'm just going to read you the quote just in case you didn't have time to read the book, because this is kind of the quote that really defines Breakfast at Tiffany's, and it's it's the title of the book is from this quote. In my version, it's on page 32, but I think we all have different versions. But Audrey, or Holly Golightly, says, "I don't want to own anything until I know I found the place where me and things belong together. I'm not quite sure where that is yet, but I know what it's like. It's like Tiffany's. Not that I give a hoot about jewelry. Diamonds, yes, but it's tacky to wear diamonds before you're 40, and even that's risky. They only look right on the really old girls. Wrinkles and bones, white hair, and diamonds. I can't wait. But that's not why I'm mad about Tiffany's. Listen, you know those days when you've got the mean reds? The mean reds are horrible. You're afraid and you sweat like hell, but you don't know what you're afraid of, except something bad is going to happen, only you don't know what it is. What I've found does the most good is just to get into a taxi and go to Tiffany's. It calms me down right away, the quietness and the proud look of it. Nothing very bad could happen to you there, not with those kind of men in their nice suits and that lovely smell of silver and alligator wallets. If I could find a real-life place that made me feel like Tiffany's, then I'd buy some furniture and give the cat a name." So I would love to hear, book chatters, what your Tiffany's is in your life. Hayden, will you start us out?
Of course. I think I'd have to say my Tiffany's is
furniture and give.
It always refreshes me. Fall's my favorite time of the year. I love watching the leaves fall and the crunch of them under your feet, all the clothes, pumpkin spice, everything. It just makes me feel like a brand new person and like I'm the most amazing person in the entire world.
Mine would have to either be the gym or Sephora, because either way you leave feeling better than you did going in. So that's it for me.
For me, I would say definitely the beach. Kind of gives me that, like, it's almost like an escape and you're somewhere else for a little while, and it's almost like nothing from the outside world can touch you in your bubble. But I guess like a more obtainable place for me is probably Starbucks. It's kind of like my Tiffany's, where when I'm there, I literally feel like I'm in a different place, and nobody messes with you. Everybody's happy. Everybody's caffeinated. We're good to go, and there's like nothing that can like burst your bubble every time I go to Starbucks. So
I think I would love to agree with Katrina on the gym, but It's only after I leave the gym that it's my happy place. But for me, it's just the water in general, whether it's like the beach, the lake, the river, a pool. I don't know, just jumping in the water is like that. It's the ultimate reset for me. So that's my calm me down, center me, the sound of water, being in the water. I love it all.
I think for me, a place like I would go to is I like to walk around Nordstrom. I just like to walk around Nordstrom. It's very nice, and there's pretty clothes, and you can try them on and not buy them if you don't want to, and if you do, they'll tailor them, usually for free, and that's fantastic, and I like that. Or there's a place up in the mountains by us in Forest Falls that I love to go, and it's probably like my favorite place on earth. Because it's just nice and pretty. I don't go very often, but I love it. And, you know, they have really pretty waterfalls and like a nice creek and stuff you can just sit by. And if it's cold and wintry, then my bedroom to sit and read a book would be my Tiffany's.
I think probably my first answer, the easy answer, would be reading a book. But I do that all the time, so I feel like that's kind of cheating. I guess it's like a year now, moved to 5 acres, and we have, part of that is wooded, and so going out in the woods and sitting on a bench and just being alone is good. There are times of the year when that doesn't work, and when that happens, usually we'll get in my car and drive, because I live somewhere where there's hardly any cars around, and so I'll just get in the car and drive, which I actually had to do this with my kids, and I didn't know what to do, and so we just got in the car and we drove for like an hour until things had calmed down at home. It's been a crazy week at our house, and just driving and like having to focus on driving and not being able to focus on all the other stuff just helps me like put my mind at ease.
Oh, I loved all your answers. All of them totally resonate with me, except for I'm with Sarah. It's more leaving the gym. I'm pretty much in a foul mood until it's actually done, honestly. For me, I would say really early mornings, since, gosh, as long as I can remember, probably 3 or 4 days a week, I'll wake up really early before the sun comes up, and it's a little harder in this season which is great because there's more light, but I don't always make it before the sun comes up. But that, like, those first just like glimmers of dawn, I just feel like are so magic, and everyone's still asleep, and the world just feels so simple and I don't know, manageable, for lack of a better word. It just makes me feel like anything is possible, and I just light a candle and I sit and I read my Bible and my devotional and drink my coffee and just kind of take it in and just kind of take that peace with me into the rest of the day. So I love that question. Thank you, Katrina, for thinking of it in advance. So our first question is the one we use every month, which is how many stars and what was your experience reading Breakfast at Tiffany's? So I'll go ahead and start. I selected this book. Every book on our reading list is selected by one of the book chatters who read it and loved it, or of course by me. And we do 4 classics a year, we do 4 nonfiction, and we do 4 fiction. If you're new, catching you guys up. So this is our first classic for the year. And the classics, you know, they're definitely a harder read. It's not necessarily about like flying through it and having it be your new favorite book so much as it's about why is it a classic, why is it still enduring. So for me, you know, the book was definitely a tough read. It was short, really short, but I would say, I don't know, it's hard for me to give it more than 3 stars. I really wanted to love it, maybe because I saw the movie and that's such a just iconic presence in my life, and the book fell a little bit flat. It was a little bit, I don't know, it was a little bit darker than I expected. So yeah, I would give it 3, but I really, you know, I've been wanting to read this book for, gosh, since, you know, 10 years, probably since the first time I saw the movie, and it's just kind of good to get my hands around the book that inspired the movie. So yeah, I would say 3 stars. How about you, Hayden?
I definitely agree with you. It was a lot darker than I thought it was going to be, so I gave it 3.5 because it is an iconic book, and I did see the movie before I ever read the book. I was very bored reading it to begin with. It felt like that book was 5,000 pages long, And Holly was a lot different than what Audrey Hepburn brought to the screen, which was really hard for me because I expected her to be much like the character in the movie. But she was totally different, and I actually kind of felt like she had like a mental disorder that was never fully addressed in the book, and she needed some help, and no one ever saw that. They just thought she was Holly Golightly and everything was fine. But overall, I liked the book, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorites.
I'd give it 2 stars. I had no context of it before. I've heard of it, obviously. I never watched the movie. I never read the book. I didn't know anything about it. And so I first read the companion book that went along with it, which was Sam Wasson's Fifth Avenue 5 a.m., which I enjoyed. And so after that, I was like super pumped to read the book. It only took me like 2 hours to read it because it's so short. And the whole time, I felt like Holly never took a breath. I had a problem with the writing style, I think. My mind would keep wandering. But the darkness didn't bother me, like I said, probably because I didn't have any expectations going into it. It's definitely one I'm probably going to sell back to half-price books and probably won't ever desire to read it again. But I get why it's a classic. It wasn't, I don't know. I just didn't like the writing style at all.
For me, I think I'd give it like 2 to 3 stars. I had never read the book, but I've seen the movie so many times, and I felt like every time I watched the movie, I wound up like totally lost almost. Like, what did I just watch? It's like you can't follow, and I guess that's kind of the point because, like Hayden had said, I think that she had something genuinely wrong with her, and the movie portrays that really well, but it kind of leaves like this really confused state after the movie is over where you almost can't follow. Like, you're trying to follow her thought pattern, you're trying to follow the idea of the book or even of the movie, and you end up just totally lost. And somebody had said in the chat that they kind of like had to reread it because they were like, what the heck did I just read? And I found myself feeling that way with the movie, and I hoped that the book would kind of clarify a little bit, but it was sort of the same with the book where it's like I would read it and I'm like, what am I even reading right now? I don't understand. Like, it's a good overall. Like I liked the story, and there's a lot about Holly that I really do enjoy. But you almost have to watch the movie several times or read the book several times in order to get enough to like her as a character or to even understand her as a character or really understand anything that's going on in the story. So it's not my favorite. Again, I wanted to like it just like everybody else said because it is a classic and it's so iconic, but it kind of left me disappointed because I was hoping the book would be a little bit more clear than the movie was.
Okay, so I haven't watched the movie. I watched the trailer of the movie. And my male coworker told me when I mentioned like, oh, I need to read the movie, and watch the movie, and he was like, ugh, don't do it. It's the worst. I turned it off after 15 minutes, and I was like, oh, you're crazy. But then I read the book and was like, I could see. I don't know. I just it's probably 2 stars for the book, and because despite being 100 pages, it felt really long. Not my preferred writing style. I did enjoy the story, I guess. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot to it to really, I don't know, to entirely pull me in. It was interesting. I guess I enjoy offbeat people, like, the little bit of the mental illness, like that kind of, that interests me. So her kookiness definitely pulled me in. But it was a tough read. I didn't get to the movie. Not sure if I will. Because the trailer didn't, which, I guess it was a trailer from the 60s, so what do I expect? But didn't really suck me in, and the story didn't. I guess kind of like Katrina, I don't feel like I will, need to pick this one up again. So I don't know, but 2 stars.
So I guess I'm the only one so far that's liked it. I would say I'd give it 4 stars, but there's just something I really like Capote. Like everything about Truman Capote, I just think he's super fascinating and interesting. And there's just a lot of things about him that you can see in this particular text. But I think there's some really well crafted sentences. So from like a structural literary standpoint, there's just some things I really like about it, and I think that it lends itself to like a great amount of character examination about, why don't they address her mental illness, and why instead are these men almost attracted to her mental illness and her instability, and a lot of questions like that. So I think the fact that it kind of is a little dark and open-ended in that way are things I liked about it, that it's kind of, there, that she's very, like, erratic and she doesn't have furniture, and I like those things about it. I don't know. I totally bought the book this morning and read it today, and so I didn't find it a slow read, but I've read other pieces by Capote, so I kind of knew what to expect coming in that way.
I'm going to give it a 3.5. I read it twice because it did start out kind of slow, and I'm not really sure why it was, because I actually like the writing style, and I liked the story, so I'm not sure if it was just that it was hard for me to get into the story, but once I did, it was fine. I'm not sure why it was so slow for me to get into. But I would give it, yeah, I think 3.5 is probably. I probably would have hated it had I read it maybe 10 years ago, because I liked really simple, I don't know if that's the right word, but simple characters, likable characters. Now I've gotten into more of, like, I really like the complex characters that you can't totally understand, and Holly Golightly is definitely one of those characters, and so I think I liked it even more the second time I went through it. I read it, and then I watched the movie, and then I read the Fifth Avenue 5 a.m., and then I read Breakfast at Tiffany's again. So maybe that's why I enjoyed it more, because I had more of the historical context and the movie in mind too. But I enjoyed it more than I guess I thought that I would, having seen the movie before, and kind of like Bree being kind of like, what is happening? But I think the book, after reading it, I understood it more and liked it more than I thought that I would. Tabitha.
Hey guys. So, as some people know from the Facebook group, I was really late on starting the book, so I sectioned everything off, and I was like, yes, I can do this. Yeah, it didn't happen, but I ended up doing Audible because I've had such a crazy week. So beforehand, I have watched the movie, and I thought, okay, so I have a gist, but then I was like, but I was expecting a lot from the book. Because you know how movies tend to be. So just going in, I was like, okay. And I listened and, was following along, and I was just like, afterward, I was just like, what did I just read? Like, I was like, is this, because I kept saying, I don't even know how I feel about this. I don't know if I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't love it, but I love kind of, the history, because I like classics. But I kept feeling kind of strange, like, well, I don't hate it, but it didn't wow me. I don't know. This is so strange for me. And I'm sitting here trying to pick out, like, some of the, just some of the things from it that were, I don't know. I had a hard time giving this stars, because I'm like so in the middle about it. I'm like, I mean, because it's a classic, and because I know the movie, and because I like Audrey Hepburn, I'm just kind of like, I can't like not like it, but I don't love it, so it's weird. I don't know where to give it a star, but I guess I would go like 2.5, I guess, because it's weird. It's a weird read. Like I felt like I read it and like I understood it, but then I had no clue what I read. Like I don't know if that makes any sense, but maybe it's like the time frame. Maybe I'm not like, I couldn't pick up on some of the things that were important for that time period or something. I don't know. It was a little off for me. Like, I don't know. It was just a little weird. So I'd say 2.5 stars. But I listened to it. The person who did the voice for Audible was great. I liked his voice, and I don't know, but it was a strange read. I don't even know if that makes any sense, but I will keep it because I like to keep classics. Um, but yeah, I don't. Other than that, I don't know what else to say about it. It's so strange, but that's my stars.
Thank you, Tabitha, and thank you for making it. I appreciate you. So the next question, book chatters, feel free to take a pass on this one, but I really think it's cool to draw out kind of literary devices and kind of writing style. So the question is, we do it every month, but it's what's your favorite quote, scene, character, or literary device? I definitely I love the image of Holly living as kind of a modern single girl in the 50s. Well, she was a call girl, so obviously that's not the part that I'm referring to clearly. But one of the reasons this book is so impactful in the 50s, and I know a lot of folks are talking about the companion in the book comments, the book chatter comments, which thank you guys for discussing this. I love reading your comments, and we're going to kind of get more into this on the next question. But for me, just that image of Holly, she, obviously her life was so tough, but she, was living on her own in New York, and in the 50s, that's like unheard of. Women didn't live on their own, and just kind of that image is, even though she definitely had some mental illness and all that, totally agree with you guys, but I don't know, maybe it's just like a single professional girl that, I don't know, that image just kind of resonates with me, and her just making the most out of her situation, especially as we learn more and more about it. That kind of, it's the same thing with Coco Chanel, right, except she was a real person. It's that orphan turned icon imagery and just story that it just really gets me. How about you, Hayden?
My favorite scene was when she gave Fred, because I can't remember his real name now, the bird cage, because it showed that she, even though she didn't take an interest in many of the men that ran her life, she saw something in him and really cared about him. Even though it reminded her of her brother, they had a closeness that I think she didn't have with a lot of people, and it was nice to see that after the hard life she had.
I liked, I don't remember who was in the scene with her. I think it was the narrator. Was going to give her some bad news, I think, and so she talks about she had to put on her lipstick and her makeup and everything and put on her sunglasses like before that happened, and so that I thought was interesting. I mean, I can definitely argue both sides of it, but I thought I can totally get it. Like, get yourself put together and then you can handle the day. Like, sometimes that makes a big difference. Like, put on some lipstick and put on some mascara and then you can go out and conquer the world. But it also showed that, like, bad things did affect her, and she wasn't always this go lightly, like, whatever, tootling along kind of lady. So I liked that scene to show, like, the different aspects of her, as well as the kind of anecdotal putting your arm around it.
I agree. I liked that they threw that scene in there because, like you said, it kind of it cut some of the always like, well, whatever, I'm wild and I don't belong anywhere, so none of this affects me. And then something happens where it does affect her, and even though she's trying to cover it up, you can feel the vulnerability. So I did like that scene in there. The quote that I actually really liked was when she was talking to Doc after he came and found her, and she said, "But Doc, I'm not 14 anymore, and I'm not Lula May. But the terrible part is, and I realized it while we were standing there, is that I am. I'm still stealing turkey eggs and running through a briar patch, only now I call it having the mean reds." And I like that because so often I find myself feeling like, oh, I'm not the same person that I was, and I'm not, the same, I don't have the same mindset, and just in general, as we get older, I'm not that same little kid that I used to be. And there's small moments, especially like I realize it's more so when I'm with my family or like moments with my kids where, you know, you are still that person. You just do things a little bit differently, or you might call it something else, or it might be in a different way, but you get sneak peeks and tidbits of the person that you used to be. And so I thought it was really cute that she had that moment where she's trying to be this like adult, like trying to make her own life, trying to be an adult, trying to run from the person that she was, but she realizes that she calls it something differently now, but it's still the same her no matter what's happened in her life. So that was a pretty awesome quote from the book that I liked.
Okay, so I really liked, I mean, it's kind of a chunk, but when she's talking to the bartender and she says, "Never love a wild thing, Mr. Bell. That was Doc's mistake. He was always lugging home wild things. A hawk with a hurt wing. One time it was a full-grown bobcat with a broken leg. But you can't give your heart to a wild thing. The more you do, the stronger they get, until they're strong enough to run into the woods or fly into a tree, then a taller tree, then the sky. That's how you'll end up, Mr. Bell. If you let yourself love a wild thing, you'll end up looking up at the sky." I don't know. I just, I really liked it. It's just, she knows who she is and kind of, I don't know, I think she was kind of understands her destructive path, and it was, I don't know, it just felt very self-examining of herself, and I guess I can't fully articulate why I liked it. I really liked it.
I had the same one as one of my marked ones, and then the one when her brother Fred dies, and she's throwing everything, and they go to her room, and it just says, even the icebox had been emptied, its contents tossed around in the room, raw eggs were sliding down the walls, and in the midst of the debris, Holly's no-name cat was calmly licking a puddle of milk. And there's just a lot of little scenes where the cat is kind of just like symbolic of like this calm thing in the storm that, you know, it kind of, because it's a cat, like nothing goes, you know, everything just goes off its back, it's independent, and I think that's why she identifies with the cat so much, or she wants to identify with the cat, and that's why when she lets it go, she realizes like, wait, no, I need that as my like symbol of my independence, and so I just like that, and there's just a couple little scenes like that, but I really like that one because I could just picture the messy apartment and her erratic behavior, but the cat just sitting there like nothing's happening.
Okay, I'm glad Sarah read that big chunk of quote earlier because mine kind of, it's like 2 or 3 paragraphs later, and it references that. She says, "Believe me, dearest Doc, it's better to look at the sky than live there. Such an empty place, so vague, just a country where the thunder goes and things disappear." And I just thought that that was just basically wraps up Holly Golightly in a couple sentences. Like she lives in the sky, but then she has these moments where she realizes how kind of lonely and difficult it can be. So I felt like there was that moment of, you see, she is aware of, I guess, the fact that she wants more, but at the same time she's afraid to have more because she doesn't want to be in a cage, like she was talking about.
Tabitha?
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I picked the same favorite quote from page 59, the same one about never love a wild thing. And I also liked how they used the where she mentions the mean reds and the fat woman, like how she was talking about the fat woman. I think she was referencing her as death. That's the way I read it. But I also thought was interesting some of the men. Like, I know like this seems to be really about Holly, but I think it's interesting about all the different men who are in her life, and I found it I don't know if it's really sad. Like I don't like all of them love her in some strange way. And so it makes me really kind of want to, unpack them, like think more about them because there's so many of them, I guess, and say like, how is it that so many different men who are all so different and unique and have their own thing going on, they all love the same woman? And so that, I don't know, I think that's really interesting as far as like the characters. Um, as far as Holly, I mean, I feel so bad for her because I'm thinking, okay, she has mental illness or something, and I feel like, okay, she was abused as a child, or neglected as a child, and so when she ends up with her, I don't know if we can call it husband at 14 or whatever. I just think that every everything's. I like some characters to be a little a little off or a little broken, but I don't know, she felt so broken that it made me feel uncomfortable sometimes. Like just, like I don't know if I could not say I didn't like her, but I just felt like, that she was so broken that I just felt like, oh my gosh, she really needs help. Like I don't want her to get locked up, but she really needs help. So it's kind of like I didn't know how to feel, and the book just kind of ends and you're just kind of like, okay, well, how do I feel? Like what happens? I don't know. I don't really like that. But I was also thinking about her. Oh man, I just lost my thought. I hate that. But it was something about like how with Holly, how she man, I can't remember it now. It's gone. Oh, sorry. That happens, mama brain. But hopefully it'll come back to me, guys. But I can't remember what I was gonna say. It was some kind of thought I had about Holly, but I don't know. That's pretty much all right now. Sorry, I'm off the cuff tonight.
You can circle back. I appreciate you gunning it to be here. The next question is really kind of the meat and potatoes of why we're here and why we're discussing Breakfast at Tiffany 60 years later. And this is kind of 3 questions in one, so you can take it however you would like. And the questions are, what do you think, of course, what do you think makes Breakfast in Tiffany endure as, the icon of modern glamour 60 years after its release? And is there a equivalent in pop culture today? And then lastly, what kind of represents that same tone of modern glamour for you? Maybe it's like another movie or another book, or I don't know, like a blog you read, or gosh, maybe a fashion magazine. So for me, and I didn't have this quote handy earlier when we were talking about kind of what kind of literary device or character rang true for you or resonated the most with you. So this is in the companion. It's in the intro to the companion, and it says, somehow, despite her lack of funds and backwater pedigree, Holly Golightly still managed to be glamorous. If she were a society woman or fashion model, we might be less impressed with her choice of clothing. But because she's made it from poverty on her own and is a girl no less, because she's used style to overcome the restrictions of the class she was born into, Audrey's Holly somehow showed that glamour was available to anyone, no matter what their age, sex life, or social standing. Grace Kelly's look was safe, Doris Day's undesirable, and Elizabeth Taylor's, unless you had that body, unattainable. But in Breakfast at Tiffany's, Audrey was democratic. And I just love that Audrey, in her role, she made glamour accessible. And that, I think, is really what changed. And I think this was discussed heavily in the comments, but it's like that image still runs true today because of who Audrey was, and she was kind of like unexpected. Like originally they wanted Marilyn Monroe to play Audrey, but I think we all, looking back at that, know that that wouldn't have worked because Audrey was just unexpected in all the best ways. And for me, the first time I saw Breakfast at Tiffany's was probably like 10 years ago, and gosh, maybe more than that. I can't even remember, but I know that her being a call girl went completely over my head. I had no idea. So for me, it was so much more about, the story was kind of irrelevant, but this just like image of Holly and her just elegance. And there's a quote by Coco Chanel that I kind of like live by, which is elegance is refusal. And I just remember that scene of her in Sing Sing, the prison, and it's like probably very intentionally, she's in Sing Sing, which is like this very drab, of course it's a prison, but very drab like set, and then she's there in this just like absolutely just iconic, for lack of a better word, hat, and she's dressed very simply, but I mean, man, she's making a statement. And I love in Fifth Avenue 5 a.m., it says, Black is the choice of someone who needs not to attract, someone self-sufficient, someone more distant, less knowable, and ultimately mysterious, powerful. And I love that. At a time when people really didn't wear black, women wore a lot of, bright, happy colors, and Audrey was just like rocking her black, and she was doing her, and I love that. And lastly, I know this is getting really long, but it's like Fifth Avenue just articulated for me what I couldn't put into words about why I loved the book. So if you haven't had a chance to read the companion, it's linked below if you want to check it out. And someone asked about companions, and we'll talk about that at the end, kind of in housekeeping things. But I can't recommend this book more. And I know Jody said the same thing, and Katrina, and everybody in the comments. But it says on page 130, all of a sudden in Breakfast at Tiffany's, chic was no longer this far away thing only for the wealthy. That was kind of a first in fashion, and it took glamour from the remote and unattainable and made it practical. After Tiffany's, anyone, no matter what their financial situation, could be chic every day and everywhere. What's more, its simplicity wasn't just pragmatic, it was an assertion of self. Pure understatement radiates confidence, individual personality as opposed to a prefab femininity. I don't need to embellish to be commanding, it says. I don't need a fashion megaphone to make myself heard. I just need to be me. It's what Audrey had been doing since Roman Holiday, but here she added a touch of girl on the go. And for me, that in Breakfast at Tiffany's, I mean, I've like tried to build a brand on that, and I could never really articulate that for myself or for anyone else, but it's like that for me is so much of like Paper and Glam, and so much of my heart is just that accessible glamour and that kind of girl on the go. And I don't know, I just love that. I couldn't help reading that very long paragraph just because it was life-changing for me. Yeah, I don't know who Paper and Glam would be from a brand perspective without Audrey. So yeah, I have a picture of her hanging on my in my house, and for those of you who clicked on the thumbnail and aren't watching live, yeah, that's why that's hanging in my house. Hayden, how about you?
I was watching Mad Men over the weekend because that's one of my favorite shows, and it was the episode where they're talking about, are you a Jackie or a Marilyn, when they're doing Playtex bras, and it made me think of Audrey because that was kind of before her time a little bit, that every girl in the South wants to be an Audrey or a Marilyn or a mix. Or you want to be a Marilyn in, your home and an Audrey out in public, and that's how we're brought up in the South, is to always portray yourself as an Audrey. And I think that's why it endures so many years, because every girl wants to be both. She wants to be sexy, but she also wants to be charming and chic and beautiful and classy and seen as envy by every person around her. I don't know if we have an equivalent of that in pop culture other than maybe the First Lady, Michelle Obama. She is very chic to me. She reminds me a lot of today's Audrey, I would have to say. And then I look for glamour for me. I go to, of course, Paper and Glam because I love reading Lisa Marie's blogs. And then I have a couple of other fashion blogs that I follow. And it's just fun to read, even though I don't live in a town that's very fashionable. It just screams like New York and Sex and the City. Oh, yeah, Sex and the City, I guess, is the equivalent of our Breakfast at Tiffany's nowadays, because every girl wants to be Carrie Bradshaw. I know I did. I told everyone that I was going to move to L.A. and have this glamorous life, like I've said before, and I just think it transcended in a different way, but every girl wants to be an Audrey or a Marilyn.
I'll piggyback off of that a little bit because I think it really shows like a very independent feminine quality where you are not dependent on a man, where your approval isn't dependent on them necessarily. I think that's why it kind of stays true. The part I thought was interesting is when they made the movie, and it talks about this in Fifth Avenue, is how they had to try and dance around the fact that she was a call girl, which is why it would have gone straight over Lisa Marie's head, because they had to in order to get it into film in the first place. And so I don't know, it's interesting to me because I feel like the United States in some ways, we're very different from Europe in terms of a sex culture and what's accepted and what isn't fully, like, in popular culture. And that's even just seen just in, like, a few of the basic themes that go through 50 Shades of Grey, that people automatically are like, no, 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 like, no, that's not okay. So I think that would be, I mean, obviously not the same equivalent, but it evokes a similar reaction to people. And then as far as a person that I would say, like, kind of has the same allure as, like, an Audrey Hepburn, I would say maybe even, like, a Kate Middleton. Like, everybody wants to be her, everyone wants to have what she's wearing, or even, like, a Jennifer Lawrence that's a little bit more edgy, yet, like, the same sort of thing. So I think it just stays relevant because those same general themes are still in the culture today.
I am going to agree with Katrina, and I kind of took it more so as what was being portrayed in the movie more so than her fashion. I do agree, and I started reading Fifth Ave, but I didn't finish it, and I did read that part about her kind of making glamour obtainable, and I do agree with that. I think what made this book so big and became like a classic is more so because of it's almost like when 50 Shades of Grey came out, where everybody was like so appalled, but at the same time everybody was reading it. It was kind of something that nobody was doing, nobody was talking about, and anybody who was in that lifestyle is like very hush, very quiet. It's not acceptable. It's something that you kind of like hide and you don't talk about. And when like 50 Shades of Grey came out, now everybody's like, you know, in like jumping on the bandwagon, and everybody wants to write those kind of books, and everybody wants to live that kind of life. And I think that's kind of what happened with Breakfast at Tiffany's, where women were very kind of muted and very, I guess they were put in this box where they're supposed to be a certain way, and certain things were acceptable, certain things weren't, and you don't go outside that box. And not only did she go outside of that box, but she didn't apologize for it. And I think that that was what made it so big, where when the book came out, I can almost picture the same reaction where women are like, oh my gosh, we can't read this book. She's a call girl, and that's unacceptable, and that's not okay. But then secretly, like, everybody has the book. Everybody's reading it. Everybody's talking about it. And then it all of a sudden just becomes acceptable, and it's not so appalling, and it's not so, like, make you blush. It becomes almost normal. And I think the reason why Audrey Hepburn worked so well for this character is because she makes you forget she's a call girl. Again, when the first few times that I saw it, I didn't even realize that was going on. I just thought she had a lot of men after her, and she was just kind of like nonchalant about it, but it's just a lot of men wanted her, and that was it. And it wasn't until I got older and like really started paying attention the last time I had watched it, and I was like, wait a minute. And then I realized like what was going on, and I think that it wasn't so obvious made even that aspect of her as a character a little more acceptable and a little more like, you know, when you think of a call girl, especially back then where, you know, sex and promiscuity was so like frowned upon and shunned, you liked Holly, you liked her character, you related to her character. Oh, and it just so happens she's a call girl. It makes her an everyday person. And so I think it was even the aspect of trying to not even to make it acceptable, but to try to break that scope of like people like that aren't somebody that you could be friends with, people like that aren't somebody that you could feel any kind of emotion towards or feel bad for or be friends with or anything like that. And then all of a sudden you have Audrey Hepburn who's loved and makes this character so acceptable. And so I think it was more so what it did for like society than it did for fashion, at least for me. I'm not super into fashion, so for me I'm like, she looks great, and that's kind of, you know, but that's kind of where I took it. I think modern day, again, it's sort of one of those like 50 Shades of Grey scenarios. I wouldn't necessarily say that 50 Shades of Grey would ever be a classic, but I think it had the same effect.
So I think what makes it endure is, yeah, Audrey, as everybody is saying, but I also think it's kind of the, I don't know that I even think it's the story, and maybe some of it is, you know, her independence and you know, shattering the cultural standards at that time. But I think that a lot of it has to do with, I mean, and this is 100% my perspective going into this, having no idea she was a call girl, you know, no real idea what the story was, and I mean, one of my bridesmaids threw me a Breakfast at Tiffany's themed wedding shower. You know what I mean? Like, so thinking, and then I was a little bit horrified when I started reading this and was like, she's a call girl. Wow. And just thinking about like that comparison, I think it was, I mean, what makes it so enduring is Audrey and then the costuming in the movie, because she's, they describe her as very chic in the book and that she's very glamorous, but I mean, I'm assuming, because we discussed that wasn't necessarily the norm of chic and glamorous at the time, and so I think it was just kind of the genius of the costumers. And I mean, wasn't that kind of the beginning of the little black dress? I mean, Audrey in Breakfast at Tiffany's with the pearl necklace and that perfect black dress, like that's the iconic little black dress, and I think that's kind of why it endures. And then I totally agree with what other people have said as far as like an enduring fashion icon, modern day. My definite go-to is Kate Middleton, though. How about you, Jana?
Yeah, I definitely think that the film is more enduring, than the book. A lot of people probably don't even realize that it's a book, or especially from like younger generations and stuff that are farther removed. And so I think Audrey, like everyone said, in the fashion and all of that, and I think it's very interesting because it is very obvious that Fred is a gigolo, right? That's pretty obvious in the film, as opposed to Audrey, who, it is a little more hushed, but they wanted that balance of both male and female. But and I think it's interesting that we see the man more openly that way in the movie, because that way we can keep the female character pristine. I think other reasons why it endures, like Sarah said about, the costuming and like the Tiffany's, themed showers, or like we all want Tiffany's jewelry. Like it's like this idea of having something nice, which when you read the quote that Lisa Marie read, really has nothing to do with the book at all. Like she doesn't really care about these nice things. It's just this feeling she gets when she stands there. But like the song from like when I was in high school, the Breakfast at What About Breakfast at Tiffany's song that kind of like brought it out. There's just like I think it's become part of the culture in a way that people don't realize it's part of the culture. And even when I was in high school, people weren't necessarily like super into Audrey Hepburn. Like everyone was like into Marilyn Monroe and Betty Page. Like that's but then I feel like that song like helped kind of bring Audrey Hepburn more to the forefront again. I think it's kind of like it ebbs and flows, like which classic film star comes forward. And I think for like a person today that I would say is kind of iconic, I would think like Reese Witherspoon, because she kind of does like, she has a fashion line, and she's very like the prim and proper looking girl, but and I don't know, she's kind of like a power woman with all her different businesses and her franchise of for making movies, and I don't know, so I feel like that she has a lot of clout in that way for female independence. And for as far as books that I think that are kind of skirting the edge, kind of like what Bree was talking about nowadays, there's a really big push, like especially in a lot of YA literature, with male male homosexual protagonists like Dante and Aristotle, Discover the Universe, and Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, and Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. And I feel like those texts are doing a lot of kind of what Capote was doing in this text, that people were like, no, and where it's done in such a subtle way that people are like, like it becomes part of the normative culture then.
I reading Fifth Avenue 5 a.m. I feel like it kind of explained to me why, like I knew that I liked the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, but I also knew that I had like this weird, I can never really sit through it. I could only watch like an hour here and 30 minutes there, and it was just really hard for me to sit through, because I never really understood the story, maybe because I watched it in pieces so often, but it kind of explained to me why it was, and that it was so iconic, that it's something that everybody gravitates towards, even though we kind of have these weird, I don't know how I feel about this feeling towards it. And like my brother went to school for, I don't really know what his major was. He went to art school for like making movies somehow. So growing up, like we were always talking about movies and cinematographers and costuming and all of this stuff. And so this book kind of like it brought all of that stuff together, like Harry Mancini writing Moon River, and how not only did he write the song, but he also worked that into so many parts of the score as well, so it kind of is threaded throughout the entire movie. And the fact that Audrey Hepburn never felt like she was good enough of an actress to play Holly Golightly, and I think bringing that vulnerability to the role is what makes it resonate with more people than if it had been somebody else. It might have worked with somebody else, but the fact that it was Audrey Hepburn and the way that she played it just brought this vulnerability to it that I think people can relate to it, and the fact that, you know, it ushered in like the birth of the little black dress, and it's like what people think of when they think of Breakfast at Tiffany's. And so, I mean, that book, I was like, yes, that's it, that's why like I would just play that movie in the background while I was doing homework when I was in college, even though I was never really paying attention to it. Like, I'd be like, oh, I'll watch this movie and do an assignment or whatever, and so I, like, there was always this weird connection to it, even though I didn't fully understand it, and I felt like that kind of brought to light like some of the things that I couldn't really put words to, and I think I would agree with like the modern icon as like Kate Middleton, and maybe that's because she kind of has that Audrey Hepburn-ish thing going on, except in reverse, where Audrey was kind of halfway royalty, and then she like became a celebrity, and Kate Middleton is kind of the opposite in that she was just, I wouldn't say a nobody, but she was not known, and then she kind of gets thrust into the spotlight as a royal now. And so I think she brings that same relatability that Audrey Hepburn brought to a lot of stuff. Tabitha?
Yeah. So the reason that I think that Breakfast at Tiffany's endures over time is because of the fantasy. The girl from the country who has nothing, who can move to a big city and reinvent herself and be whoever she wants to be on any given day, and the city offers so many things that you can wake up and decide, hey, what do I want to do today, or who do I want to be today, or there's so many possibilities. Maybe I'll be an actress, maybe I'll be a model, maybe I'll marry rich. Like, it just seems like there's so many possibilities, and I think that even if some people aren't interested in living that particular life, they find it fascinating enough to still want to kind of peek in and say, yeah, is that possible? What is she doing? And I think that's kind of like how we can kind of get sucked in, even to some of the people who aren't interested in necessarily, glamour or fashion or any of those types of things, you're still kind of drawn in because you're just like, oh wow, is that what happened? Is that possible? Did she do that? What's going to happen next? And I think it's so it's just that fantasy of just having the opportunities to live it up and just, I don't know, just reinvent yourself and just be different. Like, Holly, she didn't want to be, a mom on the farm with with Doc or whatever his name was. Like, it's just like, okay, well, I can now go to New York and, hey, who do I want to be today? And this isn't working, but I'm going to try and make it work. And if I don't like this, then I'll try something else. And she'll just be like, okay, well, that didn't work out, so I'm on to the next thing. And I think that's such a fantasy, that's very interesting, especially if you have such a, planned kind of normal life, just thinking about that can have this idea of glamour. And I would say, like, for me, I don't know, it's hard for me to think about glamour in my regular life because it doesn't feel glamorous at all. Like, running after kids, going to the playground, whoa, yeah, that's so hot. But I do like if I want to think about someone who's glamorous, or if I kind of want to be plugged into what's glamorous. Of course, I have you ladies, which I love. You guys always allow me to see what other current beautiful women are doing. But I for me, I also like to kind of follow like Kerry Washington. I think she's absolutely gorgeous, and I think like she's glamorous in my mind. So I don't know. I think that when we think about it, it's still relevant, and I'm happy that Lisa Marie and some of you mentioned some of the references to Breakfast at Tiffany's, and because I was always wondering why so many people had like pictures of her in their house. Like, you would see like pictures of people's bedrooms or a room tour, and there's like Marilyn Monroe or Audrey Hepburn on the wall, and I would always go, that's interesting to me. Like, why, it's not like a family member or anything. That's interesting. So I'm so happy that you're willing to share that, because it was puzzled me. So I don't know. I'm happy that I was able to read this particular book, to know that, check it off of my classics list. So to kind of say, yeah, I was able to kind of get in there and try to at least have a conversation about why it's so relevant and so important. And I think that, many women are going to be talking about, Breakfast at Tiffany's and the glamour and the life, for years to come. So I guess I have to give the books, kudos for that, because even if you write something and I felt like it was like I didn't get it, but it's resonating with people, and so people are talking about it so many years later and will continue to. So it definitely should get props for that.
I love it, Tabitha. That's definitely what it's all about. And I really wanted to highlight one of the things Jody said in the book chatter comments. I know those of you who aren't watching live can't see the comments, and I wish Google would update that. But Jody said, the story lives on today because everyone is a little broken, and Holly took her eccentricities and turned them into a new person. Who hasn't wanted to be that glamorous girl? And I just absolutely loved that. And the companion book, it says the same thing on page 129. And it's still talking about the black dress, but it says, black on Audrey gives her an air of cunning, just as anyone who turns something outre into an asset appears somehow masterly. That's the essence of glamour. And I just feel like that sums it up in one concise sentence as far as what Jody said and what the book said. So yeah, thank you guys all for kind of having a conversation about this, because that for me is what it's all about. It's one of those things like when you guys have something that you read and like you really want to talk to somebody about it, but like no one else has read the book. I knew if I didn't have, like a book club, or I didn't read this in kind of a community, it would have fallen a little flat for me. And I'm so glad that we have this kind of forum to flesh this stuff out and figure out what about it is really captivating and why it's kind of entranced so many of us. So yeah, the very last question is one that we just started doing, I think it was 2 months ago, and it is, if you loved Breakfast at Tiffany's or the monthly read, what book will you also love? So I know, Jody, we're totally on the same page, but she said this in the comments, but Valley of the Dolls, 100%. If Breakfast at Tiffany's, I just said that backwards, Valley of the Dolls, it did for like the late 60s what Breakfast at Tiffany's did for the late 50s. This book, especially like living in LA and kind of celebrity culture, this book is like indispensable. The movie, I will already say, I was so disappointed with the movie. I just watched it recently, and this is the kind of the opposite of Breakfast at Tiffany's. The book is just incredibly well done. I can't say enough about this book, and we're kind of running up on time, so I won't get into it. But if you have not read Valley of the Dolls, and kind of glamour is something that you just love I just love the idea of glamour, and I just kind of love that it's so elusive. Like it's almost like one of those things that's like once you put your finger on it, it kind of like it's like it sneaks away. And so anyway, this book is just another one that I would recommend. I also have to recommend our June read, which is Blonde, and I don't want to go too far ahead into kind of housekeeping things, but it's definitely no accident that we are reading Breakfast at Tiffany's and Marilyn Monroe, a book about Marilyn Monroe, a fictionalized book that's based on her actual life. It's kind of equal parts fiction and reality. So it's definitely no coincidence that we're reading these back to back, and I'm really excited to kind of compare and contrast them with you guys next month. So I know Katrina and Hayden, you guys said that you wanted to take a pass, so I guess I'll pass the ball to you, Bree. What do you have a book that you would recommend for those of the Paper and Glam community that loved Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Honestly, no, I'd have to take a pass too. I don't typically read a lot of classics, so I'm not very like knowledgeable in the classic world, or even really just books like this in general. I just am not too familiar with. This is one of the first that I've read, so I don't have one. I'm sorry.
Okay, so my recommendation is super out of left field, and it's a very tenuous string between the two. But what I appreciated about Holly is that she doesn't really make apologies for herself, and she just kind of is who she is. And so thinking along those lines, my recommendation would be a Jen Lancaster book, because I feel like she's pretty unapologetic about who she is and what she's up to, and she's a kooky mess. And I think the only book of hers that I've read entirely, I started another one. I'm bad at starting books and not finishing them, but was Such a Pretty Fat. Amazingly hilarious, and she's very unapologetically herself in that book, which I love. And I kind of felt like Holly Golightly was very unapologetically herself. So tenuous string between the two, but that's my recommendation. And then I'm going to kick it back because Hayden, you said you had remembered something, so maybe I'll jump back to you unless you forgot again. But I just wanted to pipe that in there because you did remember, and hopefully you have a better recommendation than mine.
I wrote it in the chat because I did say I didn't have one, but then I Googled books like Breakfast at Tiffany's to try to remember what that one was called, and it's called One Fifth Avenue by Candace Bushnell, who wrote the Sex and the City series. It's got High Society, New York, and Intimate Moments.
It's me. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I think on the tenuous thread, kind of like Sarah said, I think that if you didn't read Paper Towns with us last year, I think that the protagonist, well, not really, I guess the female character, Margot, in there is a lot like the Holly Golightly character, where she's just kind of like wants to be independent and do what she wants on her own, and she's a little bit, and all of these boys or people are seeking her out, but she needs to be let free because she's a wild thing. I think it's kind of that same thematic thread. If you liked Capote's style, I would recommend reading In Cold Blood, which is considered his masterpiece. And it's a nonfiction novel, kind of like the book we will be reading next month. So a novel based on a real event, embellished. And then if you would want to know about Truman Capote himself, I would recommend this book. There's a glare, kind of, and it's by George Plimpton, but really it's not by him. It's that he gathered all of these stories, so it's all interviews with people who knew Truman Capote and their perspectives of who he was and events that happened, in his life, and it's a big book, and it took me, because I read it really slowly, just a little bit every month, so it took me like 8 months to read. It's like super embarrassing, but I would just read a section here and there, and it's really good and informative. And if you wanted to know, if you read this and you wanted to know more about like his swans and stuff, and then I know there's a new book out, like just came out this year, that is specifically it's something about the swans, and it's all about those women that he called the swans. And so if you want more like non-fiction-y titles that are about the time period and the people who influenced the story, those would all be good choices.
It's started listening to The Swans of Fifth Avenue is the name of that book. I haven't gotten very far in it. I don't know, maybe a third of the way into it, and then I had to put it down for other stuff. It basically is focused on Truman Capote and mostly Babe Paley, who you hear about in Fifth Avenue, 5 a.m. And it's at the time it covers. Well, it starts like in the 70s, and then there's flashbacks. But he does talk a lot about, I'm writing this book. It's not based on you. And then after it's published, it's like, oh, no, I didn't base it on you. And everybody's kind of arguing about, oh, I'm Holly. No, I'm Holly because of this and this. And he's just adamant that, no, it's just all from my imagination. It's not based on anybody. So it might be something that if you enjoyed Breakfast at Tiffany's, you would like. I haven't finished it, so I don't know for sure. And I would piggyback on Paper Towns, and Looking for Basket is by Don Green is also in a very, very basic skeletal way, a lot like Paper Towns, in that it's about a boy who falls in love with a girl who's kind of wild and free. But it's quite a bit darker. It ends up a little bit darker than Paper Towns does. And I read biography on Audrey Hepburn, but I can't remember. There's like thousands of them. I can't remember the name of the guy that did it. I think it was Don something, and I was trying to find it, and I can't find it. Traces like her entire life and romances and working life and work after she kind of got out of doing movies. So if you're interested in Audrey Hepburn, there are like tons of biographies about her though, so that you could choose from one of many.
So I do not have a book suggestion, but I do have a Netflix suggestion if anybody's interested. It's one of the Netflix original movies. It's called Atelier, and it has subtitles, but it's about fashion, and it's about from an Asian perspective, which I've been watching it and I've been enjoying it. So maybe you guys who to do Netflix, maybe you guys will enjoy that also.
I love the Netflix recommendation. Definitely, you guys feel free to make Netflix recommendations. Or Hulu or movies. That's awesome. I love that, Tabitha. You're always coming in with a wild card. I appreciate that about you. Hayden, I completely agree on 1 Fifth Avenue. I have read all of the Candace Bushnell books, and I don't know why. Like I have them, and I kind of look through my books to try and jog my memory. And yeah, that was such a great call. Sorry, I didn't see that comment. I will say you can totally, ironically enough, you can totally, in my humble opinion, you can totally skip Sex and the City, the book. Totally skippable. So anyway, all right, let's talk about next month and Blonde. So Blonde, I just kind of want to get you guys ready if you haven't started it. It is very dark and it's very long, and there is no audio for it. I know that some of you guys have started listening to the audio that's on Audible, and that is abridged. So I have listened to some of the, like I've been listening to the audio as well as the reading the book just to kind of see like what they left out, and I don't know, they do leave out, maybe being someone who's like in LA and from LA, they leave obviously like all the little LA minutia out of it, which for me is like part of the magic, but they do kind of miss the point a little bit with the abridged. So if you are listening to the abridged, just kind of bear that in mind. I've already kind of seen some negativity based on the abridged version, and I don't really think that's a fair comparison. So, and if you are like me and Tabitha and you do rely on Audible to listen to books, especially classics that are kind of tough to get through, that's definitely a great option, just not necessarily maybe for this book. And there's always two free below in the description if you want to try it out. So yeah, what else? I would say that, let's see, mathematically you need to read over 2 chapters a night to finish Blonde in time for next month's book club, and I want everybody to finish it and join. I think a lot of us, sometimes I have a sneaking suspicion that sometimes you guys don't join live if you haven't finished the book, because the longer classic books tend to have lower attendance, which I totally get it. You want to finish it before you watch the chat, but I'm so excited about next month's selection, though, and I really want to chat with you about Marilyn Monroe and another icon. So yeah, one of the questions that I saw in the comments is about companions. So there are companions to every classic. The classic books, the 4 classics are of course this month, July, September and November, so we'll talk about companions kind of when we get closer, but really quickly, I'll put them in the description too. July is Frankly My Dear for Gone with the Wind. September is And So We Read On for The Great Gatsby. And sidebar, someone said The Great Gatsby is very, very on point with Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I completely agree. It's probably my all-time favorite book for that reason, and it's going to be another great one to compare and contrast. Again, no accident. And then lastly is, this one's kind of obvious, but in November we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and we're reading Go Set a Watchman, and the companion is, of course, To Kill a Mockingbird, because Go Set a Watchman picks up after To Kill a Mockingbird ends. So very cool. Let's see, what else? Oh, I did just release some brand new planner stickers that are for tracking reading. So it's called Glam Reads. They're linked below, and they just kind of have like weekly and monthly summaries, and just a way to, and there's like May books and June books, just to kind of track your reading and keep you on track for book club, especially for these long classics. It's especially important. And I think that's about it. Thank you guys so much for joining. Remember to give this a thumbs up so we can connect with more and more readers to join our community and our conversation as we kind of read together. And I will see you. I'm looking forward to seeing you the last Thursday of the month in June. Thank you guys. That's a wrap.